Well, hey there. Welcome to the Roundup Podcast. My name's Isaiah Babcock, and I'm the Digital Content Manager for SBTC Collegiate. As the summer closes out and we head into the fall, we wanted to bring you a mini season of the Roundup Podcast that features all of the breakout sessions from the Roundup Conference this year. All of the episodes are dropping at the same time, so be sure and check them out as you look to reach the campus in your context this fall. Enjoy.
Well, before we get started, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about you guys. We've got a small little group today, and small's not bad. It just creates opportunity for a meaningful conversation. So I'd love to hear a little bit about like your story, where you're at, what you do there, how you got connected, that kind of stuff. And then we can just have a conversation about what success in ministry looks like. So let's start with you.
Okay, I'm Katie. I work with college students at TCC, a community college.
Which campus?
We're at South right now.
I went to TCC South.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
I did that for 2 years.
Yes. So I grew up here and then moved to Chico, California, and worked for Paul Wooster for several years and got married there. Anyways, my husband and I just moved back here and over the summer. So
cool.
We are partnered with Hope Church to try and help them reach college students. So we're at TCC right now. We have a baby and a baby ministry too. So not a lot of students are involved quite yet. But yeah.
You know, when I was a student, I started a Bible study on campus of TCC South. So
That's awesome.
I can relate to what that is. But hey, if you have the confidence, you want to sit up here with us in the front somewhere so we can. Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, do you like the cross section? Do you the length of the row? I was like, yeah.
No, let's just do it up here. Okay, so you're from Chico and came down here with Hope Church. Awesome, working with community college.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. And you married with a kid. How old is your kid?
6 months.
All right. Yeah. That's awesome. Newlywed or been married for a while? Or
Married for 3 years.
Very cool.
So I don't know if that counts as newlywed.
Yeah, absolutely does. Absolutely. I read something the other day that it takes 7 years to go from me to we in our head when we get married. And I heard that. I was like, oh, that's good. And everything. But, okay, Alec, I just read your name tag. But
I'm Alec. I go to Texas A&M. I go to Brazos Fellowship down there. My girlfriend actually kind of got me involved. And
you're with Chris, right?
I'm with Chris, yeah. She knew Chris. So she invited me. We went there. I got plugged in. And with like 242, which is our college ministry, we got really involved there, volunteering. And then Chris offered me the chance to intern and be on staff next year. So I accepted, and yeah.
So you're going to be starting an internship when?
Just next semester.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you start in August.
August, yes, sir.
All right. So this is like get the ground running, lay the foundation. How long have you been like a student leader, like a part of y'all's leadership program just as a student? Have you been doing that for about a year or?
Just like at Brazos.
Yeah.
I'm a freshman, so this was I'm going into my sophomore year. So this is
right
my
on.
first year here. So
yeah, that's good.
Like we have going into next year though, I'll obviously be an intern, and I'll be leading like a Bible study community group kind of thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. So leading community groups and an intern. All right, that's awesome. But what is your name? What's your story?
So I'm Emily. I just married the college minister at our church.
Oh, okay. That's one way to do it. Yeah.
I grew up at the church, and so I know everybody on staff. Like my mom's on staff too, so I know all the ins and outs of everything. I'm just now trying to do college ministry with them.
Okay. So where are you at?
A Friendly Baptist in Tyler.
Okay. It's awesome. So UT Tyler?
So I actually went to school in ETBU.
Yeah. So which college campus do you guys focus on?
We're like not even a mile up the road from TJC. So we kind of do both schools, but our main focus is TJC.
Now, but ETBU is a little bit of a drive for you guys.
Yeah, well, that's where I went.
Okay, yeah. But UT Tyler and TJC?
They're both there.
Yeah, all right, really cool. Real cool. So your husband's the pastor there?
Yeah,
The college pastor? That's awesome. at Friendly. It's cool. What's your story? Where are you from? What do you do?
Hi, I'm Jakora, and as my commissioning prayer into my new role, which happens this upcoming Sunday, as the college and young adult director. So stepping into role as as the college minister before me is moving into a different role that he's been in for a long time. We actually grew up in the college ministry together.
Yeah.
And so doing that. Houston's first.
So U of H?
U of H, Houston Baptist, Rice are our three main. There's so many campuses. Those are the three mainly that we partner with. But hoping.
Yeah, what church?
Houston First Baptist Church.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so that's a big step, like a big life step for you on Sunday. Yeah. You feeling excited or nervous, or where are you at?
I am. At the Passion Conference, I was like, Lord, I was feeling this is the direction we were going, and I was like, but why? But He's been really faithful, and like, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to strengthen you. I'm going to empower you.
I love it.
And so I'm confident in Him that He's going to do what He said He's going to do.
That's cool.
So yeah, I'm excited.
You should be. A little bit about myself, just because everyone's gone. My wife and I are in Nacogdoches, Texas, which is why I asked about Tyler, because we go to Tyler all the time. All the time's not right. We go to Tyler like 10 times a year. I don't know, maybe like 8 times a year. So if you count that as all the time, then sure. But we go to Houston too. We don't go to College Station very often. Every time I drive by the South Campus, I tell my wife, I went to school there. She's like, I know. Every time we drive by, you tell me this. Because I grew up here, and so my mom still lives like 5 miles down the road and that kind of stuff. But we are the college directors at Fredonia Hill Baptist Church, and we work with the campus of Stephen F. Austin State University. We've been doing that for, I don't know, we've been married for 5 years, and we have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so we have 2 toddlers. They're both boys. They share a bedroom, and they are crazy. I think, some people like have like those kids in the nursery. Like I think we have those kids, and it's like the kids that are like, did you give them like a cup of Mountain Dew for the game? No, they just, that's God-given personality. But all that being said, the campus at SFA is our home, and we live right next to campus for the purpose of reaching the campus. And that's real simple. We just want to be available for them. And so for us, it meant a whole lot for us to live next to them. And so a little bit about the campus of SFA. It's 13,000 students. And you would think that in the heart of East Texas, like the Baptist capital of the world or whatever, that a large majority of it would be involved in a church. But it's not. On our best day, the churches in Nacogdoches successfully reach 8% of the campus, and 92% of that campus isn't involved in actively involved in a church, or really just involved in a church. Now, do they know the Lord? I have no idea, and I'd press you to figure out if you could figure that over a survey, anyways. But so I don't know the spiritual condition of that, other than conversations I have with people. But I know that we've successfully got 8% of our college students reached as far as being involved in a local church. It was interesting. I ran those numbers with a guy from Texas Tech and with Chris last night. At A&M, you guys have 12% reached by a local church, and at Texas Tech, they have 10% reached by a local church. They just had numbers. And it's very interesting to see that pattern. And so for me, that's my why behind college ministry. Why don't you move and go somewhere where there are no believers? Because in Nacogdoches, we have 3 things. We have pine trees, we have donut shops, and we have Baptist churches. And that's what we have. But the answer about why don't I move is because there's 92%, and that 92% changes every single year. And so that's our why. That's why we're still here. But we're going to talk a little bit about success in ministry today. So we're going to talk conversationally as a small group. So I'm going to ask questions, and we're just going to have a conversation. It might feel different than the last breakout you guys came from, but that's fine. I want you to think about an event that your college ministry or whatever ministry you're comfortable with. You kind of said you're stepping into college ministry, and so. But I want you to think about an event that your college ministry has thrown that was unsuccessful. Real quick. And when you have that, I want you to share why it was unsuccessful. So we're just going to start with our dirty laundry first. But why was that event unsuccessful?
Okay, I have an example. So every once in a while, I think it was more like once a month. It was mostly like in the fall semester. We'd have like a freshman, like it would just be like a freshman breakfast.
Yeah.
Where we'd all like get together. And to be honest, like I never really went to it. And none of my friends really went to it either. And like maybe like 2 or 3 people went regularly. And like I think the reason why not a lot of people went because it was like at like 7:30 on a Sunday. And I'm like, no one wants to get up that early. Like
Sure.
Services at 9:30.
Sure.
So I think that's just one reason why that wasn't very successful.
Okay. So you measured success based upon attendance.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. No. It's okay. It's a healthy space. Unsuccessful event. Either one of y'all want to chime in? Oh, go ahead, please. What was it? Any event that comes to mind? Because I feel like if you're like me, you know if an event's successful about 15 minutes into it. Like you're already aware. So we're going to talk about success. So like, what's been an event that you know that wasn't successful?
I think within the first 2 weeks of our outreach on campus
Sure.
past fall, which is our first 2 weeks on campus ever.
Sure.
That we had an ultimate frisbee and popsicle event, and I don't think anybody came. But
Yeah.
I think part of that is because we didn't know the campus very
The flow and
But yeah,
yeah.
it was definitely measured by attendance, but because nobody came. But yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Just being
That's good.
familiar with the campus, which we weren't.
That's good. So, but even though you felt like you used your metric of attendance, even in that you go, okay, what do we like? What's our growth? How are we growing from this? You're able to separate the two of them. We're actually gonna talk about that being really healthy here in a second. But all right, think about an event that was really successful. Tell me about it and why was it successful?
We just had a summer bash event where it was our last college ministry meetup of the year, and a ton of people came out, played a bunch of tailgate games. There were some giveaways. It was just a really fun experience.
Okay, so how did you know it was a success?
Well, for everyone was having a wonderful time together.
Okay, so fun.
Yeah, everyone was there for 4 or 5 hours.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, I think it was just a good experience more than anything.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So attendance, fun, and people wanted to be there.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
I think we're sharing success, so let me share one and I'll start. Can I share both? Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. Unsuccessful during the pandemic, we did kind of a split thing of sometimes some people were willing to go back, some people weren't. So I was head of digital, and we had community groups, and it was just not working out. It was,
Sure.
People were stressed, they were tired of being on computers. It didn't meet the need because of the modality of that reality.
Absolutely.
One successful thing that we did was we had a guys and girls night, so I was in charge of the girls night. And we did what we called Luca and Luca. So we had Buca de Beppo, Italian food, and watched Luca, the movie with the girls, and just kind of incorporate that, and just having a pause and rest and talk to each other about how's the semester been? What things are you afraid of? What do you need to say someone to your Bruno to? So being really cheesy. And I think it was successful, one, because it was engaging. I think they got to get to know each other well. A lot of them brought friends, not just friends who were church, but people who didn't know Jesus, but they were you should come to this event. So they felt comfortable to bring them into that space. And even though it was pretty cold outside that night, they were willing to stick around and hang out. And so, yeah, engagement, new faces, and it was just, it was really fun. And yeah, I think it was.
No, it's good. That's good. That's good. Engagement, new faces. Those are your metrics there. That's good. So let's talk just a little bit about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is that all of us measure success in our ministry based upon a couple of things, but the largest thing that we're ever going to do to measure success is attendance. And we will always do that in our head. And I don't care if you are just starting out a college ministry on a community campus, or if you're a pastor of a megachurch. You're going to have some sort of propensity to think about numbers as the avenue by which you calculate success. It's ingrained within us. But the problem is that that's highly anti what Jesus taught. And so we need to talk a little bit about if numbers aren't how you equate obedience, numbers aren't how you equate success, how do you go home and you lay your head in the pillow and you go, okay, was tonight successful? Was I successful? When you do an end of the year evaluation, you say, man, were we successful this year? Or you you lay in your bed and you think, or you're in your office because you've set aside time to do evaluations. We're going to talk a little bit about end of the year evaluations as well, but you just are evaluating. You go, okay, was I successful? Were we successful? We have to figure out what's our metric for that. And so there's a couple of different options you can go to. The first one is that you could say attendance. Okay. There was a person in the group last time I taught, and they told a story about 2 different times they hosted the same event. Keynote, prominent speaker, killer band, promoted it, did all of the promotion, but one time heavily attended, one time not heavily attended. Okay, but they did all the work. X plus X, 1 plus 1 is supposed to equal 2. God, I put in the effort. Reward my effort. Reward my effort. And when we place success based upon numbers, we're telling Jesus to reward our effort. And that's kind of not necessarily how the kingdom of God always works. So we need to talk about the pressure to define success in certain ways. So the A&M football team, dude, what is a successful season for the A&M football team?
A successful season?
Yeah. Define it.
At our standards, a 10-win season.
10-win season.
Probably 10-win season.
Okay.
I'd say that's a successful. Last year was a disappointment. We only won 8 games.
Okay, but how about making it to the playoffs?
Make it to the playoff. That would be
that's success.
That's the goal.
That's the goal every time.
Winning a national championship.
The national championship is obviously the goal. Every coach will tell you that. They're all lying. They all know that. They all know they can't do it, but they'll tell you that. But they really just want to make the playoffs. What happens when that year you go 2-10, right? You would say, it's not a successful season. Okay, so they're measured based upon how well they do. They're measured based upon performance. So they're measured based upon performance. What about an author? If someone writes a book, how do you know if they're successful?
Based on how many books they sell.
How many books they sell. If they're on the what? New York Times bestseller list. Did I accomplish this achievement? And so it's achievement based. But what's our achievement? Our achievement is numbers, as we tell ourselves. And so if success is based upon achievement, then we have to say, okay, well, what can I achieve? Well, I will try to achieve numerical growth. But that falls apart a little bit. But even think about yourself. How are you deemed successful? By your what? You are deemed successful in the eyes of others by what you've done. Another word for that is achievement. What you've accomplished. And so society tells us that the metric by which we measure success is achievement. And the kingdom of God goes against that. So I want to tell you a story. from the book of Luke. I'm not going to turn there because this isn't Bible study. We're just going to talk about the scripture. That's okay. Everyone's okay with that. All right. So, you remember the Last Supper? Jesus gathers all of his disciples around and says, "This is my body broken for you." And they have this real sweet, personal, intimate moment. And then he leaves and goes to the garden to pray, right? Well, the book of Luke tells us that there was also a conversation that happened on the road between the Lord's Supper or communion or the Last Supper, whatever we call it, and his prayer time in the garden. This conversation arose from the disciples. I love the disciples. They're the most relatable people in all of Scripture. And the disciples decided to talk about who's the greatest among them. That's the conversation they got into. Jesus is about to die for the sins of the entire world. But these guys decided, now's a really good time for us to talk about which one of us is better than each other. So let's do that. And then they engaged into the conversation. How does Jesus respond? He says, look, what are you doing? He says, the Pharisees talk about their power in front of one another, and they lord it over each other. But that's not going to be the case with you guys. For here, if anyone wants to be great, he must be like a child. If anyone wants to be great, he's a servant. You become the least of all here. He's telling us that, like, success and greatness aren't tied to accomplishment. He's given us that upside down kingdom paradigm. That he says right there in that moment that if anyone wants to be great, he must be least of all and servant of all. So greatness and success is not attached to how much we've achieved. And if we're being honest, our humanity kind of fights that a little bit because we are creatures that can be trained. Okay? We can learn how to do things. And one of the things that we've learned is that success equals achievement. But that's not success in the kingdom's eyes. That's not success in the Lord's eyes. Underneath the rule and reign of Jesus, that's not success. But if every single one of us is honest inside of our hearts, we are like, what can I do? What can I achieve? The classic textbook example is, will people come to my worship night? You know, you look at how many people are in your college ministry and you say, okay, this is nice, but if I can get just 30 more or whatever, that's the number I really want to be at. Because for whatever reason, that's a good number. Like, that's the respectable number. I just need to be right there. I've got a group of this. I just want to add it a little bit, and then I'll be respected. And then people can see what I've achieved, what I've accomplished. But that actually is a really terrible metric. But rather, in John 15, Jesus tells us that if we love him, we will obey his commandments. And 1 John says commandments aren't burdensome, but that's another day. But he says that the metric by which we measure success is obedience in the kingdom of God. So the question of have you been successful is the question of have you been obedient? That's powerful. Why is that powerful? Because it takes the emphasis off of who. Like, if success is based upon obedience, not achievement, then the emphasis is taken off of who? Ourselves. This is a breakout that is less about like X's and O's and nuts and bolts and here's how you build a leadership pipeline. And this is more about like let's talk about the heart a little bit, you know. But we go, no, we don't need to talk about the heart. We need to go do stuff. And Jesus, he gathers everyone around in Matthew 5 and 7, gives a Sermon on the Mount. And he doesn't say, okay, when you go do this, here's the leadership strategy and here's how you develop leaders. He talks immediately about their heart. So sometimes we got to focus on the heart. But heart's not fun because we can't measure heart change. But I can measure attendance. I can measure what I've accomplished. God's saying, to use an old Dallas Willard phrase, there needs to be a renovation of our heart and to go through that process. So if success is obedience, then we need to understand, when am I being obedient? So we need to think through obedience in our local context. So it's Jacora, is that right? So Jacora and then Katie. Okay, whew. That was a test. Y'all have different assignments, right? You're at First Baptist Houston, right? Okay, you're at TCC South. I feel like I can relate to you so much because I've done a Bible study on that campus for a year and a half. Like, I understand, okay? I understand all kinds of stuff in regards to that. Like, I understand your struggle. And I never lived in Houston, but my friends have. But I don't know Houston life. But I do know that, like, your steps of obedience are totally different from each other. And that's true and not true. Because there's general obedience that God's given you, but there's also specific obedience that God's given you. And so we have to understand the difference between those two, and we need to reflect. Here's one of the things that we need to emphasize, though, is that just because we've been obedient, so therefore we've been successful, does not mean that we don't have room to grow. So I want you to think about the first time you learned how to cook anything, all right? If you were given directions, like a HelloFresh meal or something, like they gave you directions and they said, hey, here's what you need to cook. I want you to make me an omelet. And you can follow directions. Can you produce an omelet at the end? You produce something that looks like an omelet. But after making omelets for 10 years, 1, are you going to need the directions? 2, are you going to add different spices, ingredients? You might say you like mushrooms. You might throw in all kinds of stuff. It's because you've gotten better at the process of making an omelet. The fact of the matter is, someone asked you to make an omelet and you were obedient the first time, and then someone asked you to make an omelet again, and you were obedient 10 years down the road, but you've had practice, and so therefore you've gotten better at it. So you can still have success and have room to grow. So obedience equals success, but success still allows room for growth. And I think that's where we get confused. We think, okay, have I been successful? One of these days I'm going to be successful. I'm not going to have to change anything. That'll be the day I won't have to make any major ministry changes. Or success will be the day that all of my student leaders stay interested in being student leaders for the entire year. That's definitely not talking from experience. But success will be the day when I have 10 people at my Bible study every week. That's success. And you've got to say, okay, no, that's just really good news. That's just a blessing. That's a gift. Here's why we have to differentiate the two. Because success and the human heart are tied together in our mind. And if you view yourself as unsuccessful, you're now starting to impact the way that you perceive yourself and the way God perceives yourselves, and your identity and your worth and your value are all locked up in, have you been successful or not been successful? So what happens when you're not successful? What happens when you do all the right things and no one comes to your event? Have you failed? Does God just not want to bless you right now? Is it your fault? No. It just means no one came to your event. And you get to look at it and say, okay, now why? Let's ask the question, why, and let's learn, let's grow. What you did with your TCC thing. Okay, we did popsicles and Frisbee. No one came. Okay, does that mean you failed? No. It means you have an opportunity to ask why. You tried something, it didn't work. Now, let's ask why and look to grow. Were we successful? I don't know. Did God ask you to do it? If God asked you to do it, then yeah, we're going to do it. I don't know, did God say popsicles or did God say fruit roll-ups? That's not the issue. The issue is okay, God said go to the campus. God said do activities to meet the students so that you can bring them into community, and teach them the gospel. Okay, cool. Were you trying to do that? Was that your attempt? Yes. Okay, and that's a step of obedience. Now you get to analyze the why. And that's just where we get off. We get backwards. We get backwards in thinking okay, I need to do these things. I need to achieve these things. And if they come to my event, I'm successful. But really, success isn't tied into that at all. So I want to talk a little bit about how we think about whether or not we are being obedient. I'm going to pull up my notes here. Because if success is obedience, then how do I know if I'm being obedient? So we need to answer that, we have to think about the job title that's been given to you. Not by your church, but what is the job? Another way of saying this is, what is the work that God has given to you? What's the work? So to do that, we're going to do a little exercise here. I want y'all to name places in Scripture. Geographical locations. Name a place. Jericho. That's good.
Jordan River.
Jordan River. Jerusalem. Israel. When I say things like Jericho, what do you think of? The story. When you say things like Jordan River, you think of the story, right? Jerusalem or Israel, the harder ones, because we have a modern day one that comes with that. I say things like Ephesus, you think of something. I say something like Samaria, you think of that. I say Babylon, you think of the stories, right? I say Nineveh, you think of something. You see, there's power in place, and God made it that way. God made places. How about Eden? God made Eden, right? So God makes man, places him in a geographical location, and does what? Gives him a job. All right, we get afraid of work sometimes. Some of us are like anti-workers. We're like, we'd rather just straight up chill. And God creates man, places him in a perfect place, and gives him a job to do. And that job was to cultivate the land, care for the land, and name some animals. Now, that's kind of a big deal, a bunch of animals. And but there's power in place. Have you guys ever gone to a specific place and immediately just being there, you were taken back to a memory, or you felt an emotion you hadn't felt in a long time? I remember I went to my grandparents' house like 3 years ago, and I hadn't been in, 8 years. Like, it'd been a long time. My grandparents live in Tennessee. And I was with my wife, and I just had to stop and breathe, like in the driveway. And I went, oh my goodness. Like, it's just peace just flooded me just because of the location. And the reason was because I have no bad memories there, which is a really cool thing to say.
Yeah.
I also spent a very small amount of my life there, but like, it was still really cool to like, wow, and it just, there's a power of place. And so what God does, he creates people and gives them jobs, but puts them in places. And so the reason I'm talking about place and this idea of success in ministry is that you have to understand where God has placed you. So he's put you in a specific geographical location. And so what's your job? Well, your job is just like Adam. Cultivate the land, care for it, and do the work God's given you. So if God has put you in a specific place for a specific work, then we need to know what that work is. For Adam, he had to name the animals. But the idea of caring for the land is a generic work. All of us care for the land. You see, I think that is the role of a minister. We use the phrase pastor. Like, that's the job of a pastor. The job of a leader in a ministry is to care for a geographic location, care for the land, and do the specific work. We are to care for the souls of the people in that specific location. That's our job. That's the obedience thing God's given us. He's asked us to care for the souls of those in that specific location. And that becomes the metric by which we understand things. So if there's power in place, and we think of stories, and we think about the term pastor, then the way that we approach our students, it has to be from the lens of a pastor who wants to be obedient. I want you to just imagine Adam. It's just a really powerful image in my head of him being in the garden, caring for the garden, plucking weeds. I don't know if they had weeds before the fall, but like just caring for it, caring for the trees, caring for the animals, right? What he's doing in that context is the God-given assignment of a pastor. He's pastoring, he's shepherding that place that God's placed him in, while at the same time walking with God, because it says that God walked in the garden. And so as pastors, as ministry leaders, we walk with God in a specific geographical location, and we care for the souls of the people that are there. And that becomes more of our work. And he's also given us a specific work. So there's the general work of caring for souls. And there's this specific work, which for Adam was naming the animals. That specific work is no longer needed. I don't need to go out and name animals. But God's given me another specific work. So I've created this little handout that we can kind of go through. And this is just going to help us. Have I already given this to y'all? Okay. This is just going to help us just kind of do a heart check to think about our ministry and to think about our individual. Here, can you take one of those, pass it down? This will help us think about our college ministry, but also think about our individual. And then halfway through this page, I'm going to switch gears and kind of talk about how you can reflect on your college ministry as a whole. I remember I said like there's a difference between being successful and having room to grow. Both those things can live in the same home. And so the second half of this conversation is going to be was just some end of the year evaluation questions that we use to help determine how we need to grow in our ministry. But if we've go ahead and said they can live in the same room, but we've detached them, I will not have my identity shaken if no one comes. I will not think I'm more successful based upon just I put a lot of effort into it. No, I'm successful based upon my obedience. And I want to train people who think that way. So the first personal evaluation question, these questions are meant to help us think, am I being obedient? Does my schedule prioritize praying for and caring for the students in our college ministry? Somewhere along the way, pastors have gotten this weird habit of prayer. It's just for my quiet time, but I have to go and do work when I go to the work. But as ministry leaders, guys, prayer is our work. It's part of our work. I would encourage you, schedule a time of prayer in your week, in your calendar for your campus, where it's Tuesday at 11 a.m. When you would normally have a time that you're with people or whatever. But schedule a time where you're just sitting in prayer for your campus. Prioritizing prayer and caring for the students in our college ministry. It's that simple idea that we're caring for souls. And if our job is a pastor and we cultivate the land and we live in the Garden of Eden, or for us that means College Station, or for us that means TCC or Houston or Nacogdoches or Tyler, if we do that and we live in those places, we're going to care for those students. And so just praying for them is the first part. If you're not praying for your students, I'd encourage that and kind of say, I think God calls you to it. Second of all, have I led, and interesting words, I'll get there in a second, but have I led our college ministry in the direction that God has told me to go? Or am I just putting my best ideas into practice, hoping to find numerical success? I couldn't think of a more succinct way to say that wasn't a run-on sentence, but I think we understand what I'm trying to say there. Have I been obedient to what God's asked me to do? Or am I just let's try this and see if it sticks. Or we'll try this and see if it sticks. And it just becomes this churning out of ideas where you've actually switched your job description from pastor to event come with, I don't know, whatever those event planner. Like you just eventually just start coming up with events and like, well, let's try this. We'll try this. Let's try this. And you're taking other events that churches do and you're saying, well, it worked over there, so let's do it here. This worked for this campus, let's try it here. But if like, has God asked you to do that? And does that fit into what God's asked you to do? And that's a thing we have to sit with the Lord on sometimes. I think sometimes we might be like, oh God, I just don't know why we can't reach athletes. And it's like, well, I've asked you to care for the people here. Like, let's start here. Like, or it's just, there's different types of things. And so is God told us to go in a certain direction? Or are we saying, God, here's my idea. This is what we need to do. And we have to be careful with that. The third one is, all right, we're going to talk a little bit here. Have I committed myself to the active work and the passive work of a pastor? Okay, the world says you get success based upon your what? Your achievements. Great job. So if success is based upon achievement, you gather achievement by what? Active work or passive work? By active work, right? By doing stuff. I grew up in a household that prioritized, and by prioritize, I mean like put on a pedestal the idea of hard work. In athletics, they always told you that like hard work given time beats talent. And you're always like, well, I'm not talented, but here we go. And hard work was always emphasized. Well, what happens when you're running 100 miles an hour and you're doing everything you can and you don't see the achievement? You don't see the progress. You don't see the student coming to the Bible study. What do you do in that moment? Do you say, I'm just not successful? Does God not want me to do all these things? Like, I'm doing this for you, God. Why are you not blessing me? Like, no, it's not your effort here. God says you have to be a part of an active work and a passive work. When God makes the world, and in 6 days, he makes the entire universe. That was a big deal. It took a lot of work. And on the seventh day, he rests. And so he sets this like outline that we have to rest. When he gives the 10 Commandments to the Israelites, he says, you are to rest. You are to take a Sabbath. Remember a Sabbath day and keep it holy. It's in the 10 Commandments. And Jesus shows up and says, take a Sabbath, rest. So there's an active work and a passive work. You are not being obedient to the Lord if you're only doing the active work. And in the same way, you're not being obedient to the Lord if you're only doing the passive work. You need to get in the game, and you need to sub out and rest. And God's asked you to do both those things. And that was my problem. I struggled to rest. I would take time off, and I would have time with my family. But there was no abiding. There was no sitting with God in that moment. There was no letting him rejuvenate my soul. It was just effort. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to talk to more people. I'm going to cram more students in with my schedule. I'm going to let more people hang out with me, and my family's over there taking the brunt of it because I've now prioritized the active work more than the passive work. And the passive work is family life. It's prayer. It's Sabbath. We can't throw that out. And we've just been told we throw it out. And college students are the worst about not taking a Sabbath. The absolute worst about not taking a Sabbath. Because they won't take a Sabbath. Because deadlines never stop. But God says take a Sabbath. But they're not going to take a Sabbath unless they see us take a Sabbath. And you need a Sabbath for you to understand the idea of obedience. God has not asked you to run a rat race, run a marathon at sprint speed. Here's some practical reflections just for pastors, particularly if you're like overseeing an entire college ministry, which is 3 of y'all. And for you, buddy, this is like stuff just to think about, like just internally. So there are 3 generic things that God's asked pastors to do that are true of any place. We talked about caring for souls. Like you're never going to like go somewhere and not care for someone. Like I'm a pastor, but I hate people. Like, well, you're not a pastor, and maybe you should, think about that. I'm not going to read these texts, but there's texts there like, a pastor's job is to equip the saints to the work of the ministry. And if you're not equipping the saints for the work of the ministry, you're not being obedient to what God's called you to do as a pastor. In that sense, you're not being successful. And so a successful pastor is someone who equips the saints to the work of the ministry. Have you taught sound doctrine? A successful pastor will teach sound doctrine. Have you become power hungry? A successful pastor understands the whole principle that we just walked through with Jesus and his disciples. There's a problem in leadership, and that problem is just that there's terrible leaders everywhere. And so how are people in leadership roles, even though they're bad leaders? Well, it's because they say the right things, or they have this degree, and so therefore they're allowed to do it. The church is a place that we've allowed terrible leaders to have a leadership position. And there are places that people who are in the church have been given leadership roles, but someone in a business world wouldn't hand that man a leadership position. Why is that? Like, well, they have the title of pastor. And I just really want to redeem that. Like, I want pastors to be really competent, capable leaders, which is why I believe in conferences like Roundup. Now I'm getting on a soapbox. But, like, and so when you see people, like, say, I've become power hungry, you're taking control of the ministry. You notice the name of the breakout was Defining Success for Your College Ministry. Did you catch that? It was a word play, because it's a complete myth. It's not your college ministry. It's our college ministry. And when you move from yours to ours, you realize that power has actually been taken out of your hands, and all you get to do is push the ball, and it just gets to go forward. It's not yours, it's ours. And all of a sudden, you not teaching a Bible study is okay, because it's not yours, it's ours. I use this analogy that the college pastor is a coach. And in order for the coach to do his job well, like, he has to have people who play the game. Like, if I'm a coach but I don't have a team, you're not a coach, you're a guy. Like, but I'm going to thrive when my students are in the game. And on that team, there are different roles. And there's a captain, or you might call him a student leader, right? Or an intern, or whatever phrase you want to use, a resident. And they're going to play different roles. And they're going to be helping people understand in the game, oh no, remember that you're supposed to have this coverage, or you're supposed to come to this side of the court when this happens. Like, they're going to be helping them in the game. But the coach can't go into the game. The coach never subs himself in and says, fine, I'll do it myself, in a very Thanos style. But, like, he can't go into the game. The coach is there literally to coach his people who are in the game. And so when we become power hungry, have you forgotten, like, you're not in the game? Your students are in the game. Now, am I saying don't be on campus? Am I saying don't hang out with students? Am I saying don't invest your life into students? No, do all of that. But are you enrolled in classes? No, they are. So therefore, they're the ones in the game. So that's just a really healthy thing for us to ask. So success means that you are obedient to what God has asked of you. I didn't put it on here, but part of what we have to think about is just, what has God specifically asked us? Who has he asked us to be? Who has God asked us to be? And just be that. Like, the ministry at A&M is going to look so different than the ministry in Tyler. Like, I've been to both locations, seen both universities. The culture is dynamically different. Like, y'all's ministry is going to look totally different. And so you need to be obedient to who God has asked you to be. And that's success. And so if you're obedient to something, whether that be a conversation or an event or a Bible study or a community group, and it bombs and doesn't work, that's fine. You were obedient. Now you need to learn. You need to grow. God's asked you to grow. But I don't know. We need to rewrite that in our head. So it's not like this new strategy for y'all to learn. It's saying, like, hey, this thing's got to be rewired to where achievement isn't success, but obedience is. But obedience requires intimacy with God so that you can know what he's asking you to do. versus achievement requires effort. Obedience requires intimacy with the Lord, but achievement just requires your own effort. So I guess before I move on to like end of the year questions, like here's how you can be thinking about ways that you can grow. I'd love to just know, like, do we have any questions or thoughts so far? I'm going to look up how long we're in here. We're in here till 3:45. Okay, we've got like 20 minutes. But any questions so far about anything, or anything stood out to you that you just feel like we need to emphasize a little more? If not, that's fine. I just kind of wanted to pause, let us breathe for a second.
Yeah, really cool. But the year before that was pre-Murmur Rangers.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. Come on.
/ comment. I think one of the things, and especially in the Bible Belt, where like church being a business, being a reality, even if we don't want it to be.
Yeah.
Navigating the reality that I clock in, clock out, do a job.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do you get comfortable in and or communicate the passive work in that work time in a way that isn't, I mean, I guess we're not responsible for them. I think that's part of it too. But that isn't, I'm just sitting here, I'm praying, but I'm like sleeping. Like there are people who...
Are you talking about like in office hours, 8 to 5 stuff?
Yeah, it's because it's an interesting space of like, so introvert, college director at a mega church who, that all the things that you're saying is like, yes. And I hear in the back of my head, like, but what if someone asks me, like, what do you mean you spend X amount of time just in prayer or whatever? And I don't know if anyone would say that outwardly. And I think that's what makes it even harder. It's a space of like...
Sure. It's actually, it's an insecurity.
Yeah, it is.
It's insecurity.
Internal, yeah. And so it's
Yeah.
like, how do you manage that? How do you break out of that insecurity?
That's good. That's really good. That's good. Because what you're saying is that you feel this push inside your soul for production and activity that leads to achievement.
And I hate, and it's not even like, personally, like I love the concept of resting in rhythm and obedience to God, and those things give me so much life.
Sure.
But I feel that. Well,
they're designed to give you life. That's how I made it. I think part of it is you have to look at like when God gives the job of a pastor, when God gives the job of anyone who oversees people in a shepherding capacity, what's that job? Is that job like, because that's the foremost of your job. Like, yes, we plan events. Like, sure, we're all going to plan some sort of worship night. We're all going to plan some sort of small group. Like, sure, well, we're event planners. But at the core of what we are is like we're ministry leaders, and we're called to do a pastor's work. So if we're called to do the work of a pastor, well, that work is caring for souls. And how do I care for souls? By being with them, encouraging them, teaching them scripture, and also by praying for them. And so you have to tell yourself that it's not a lesser work, but it's just as important as creating digital content, or it's just as important as sermon prep, or it's just as important as, I don't know, we use Church Community Builder, or just as important as CCB, or like anything like it's just as important, if not more, because that's the actual work that we're supposed to do. But what's happened is because we've gotten told, based on everything in our job description, that these are the things we actually have to do. And somewhere in there, and all job descriptions are different, so I'm not going to hate on job descriptions, but we think about accomplish, achieve, and the work of a pastor is to pray, to sit with people, to care for them. But I'm saying this out of the most like performance-driven mind ever. Like I am all about getting things done. I am productivity-minded. I am efficiency-minded. Like that's how my brain works. And so this talk has not come out of like some dude where this is easy to understand. Like this is talked out of like God has had to shape this in me, and it's still shaping. And so, yeah, I think you have to view it as work. You have to view it as work. Also, the first thing you said of like understanding, go clock in, clock out. Yeah, you have to release that. Yeah, 'cause that doesn't exist. But if you Sabbath, you've created healthy boundaries. But it's not like, well, I'm 6 o'clock and I just broke up with my boyfriend. My heart's deeply disturbed. And you're like, yeah, my next appointment's a week from now. Like, no, come over to my house right now. So, yeah, the clock in, clock out thing. Yeah, that's good. That's really good though, because that's the temptation. The temptation is like, no, I need to be productive, and God's like, care for your people, care for souls.
Especially within college ministry, I think that hitting on like, and I think part of it is because I'm a Black woman in a leadership position that I'm like never would have thought I would have been in.
Mm-hmm.
There's that aspect of like hearing that and hearing like pastoral leadership. I'm like, oh, the implications of that are all the things that you're talking about. But I'm not sure I've heard that, not even just in my own self, but like in local churches talking about college ministry, there is a lot of emphasis in action because it's young bodies going and doing things as opposed to the more contemplative aspects of leadership.
Sure.
So I think that's a profound reminder for just like college ministry in general and for college leaders that is something that's important and something to pass on even to our students and our student leaders too, for them to understand that too. But like it's there's definitely a mindset shift in that, what that role actually means. So I think that's really helpful.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. It goes back to like active work and passive work.
Right.
Like if you're just passive, like if all you do is pray, it's like, dude, God's called you to be on that campus. Go hand out freeze pops and go play Ultimate because you need to meet some people. Yeah. Like you need to live in both worlds, and we tend to lean one way or the other, and so we've got to live in both. But yeah, well, let's talk about like some ways that we can analyze growth. How about that? And then we'll finish with a fun little quote on the back from one of my favorite authors. Okay, so these are questions that we use for our college ministry, or questions that I've heard different people use. These aren't questions that are like hypothetical. This may work. These are questions that like we've asked students, or someone I know has asked a student, or so on and so forth. So, very first thing, remember going in, success equals obedience. Even though we're obedient, we can have room to grow. So now that we're room to grow, these are ones we've done. The first point is, if you haven't done an end of this semester reflection yet, I would really encourage you to take time to do that. And you and your husband, I guess, we're doing that together. Like, oh, this is a perfect date. Or like you're stepping into this new position. Like, okay, let's reflect. And in a new position, you probably want to affirm a lot of the good things, right? Like you're stepping into a whole bunch of new, like just hearing his perspective on things. You have an interesting opportunity because you can answer these questions, then go to Chris and just tell him your answers. Yeah, that'd be great. All right, so simple questions like, okay, what worked? Where did we struggle? Those are pretty self-explanatory. What worked was community groups. We struggled on campus. All right, why do we struggle on campus? Write down those things. Third, do we live out our core values? Do our students know our core values / vision / strategy? So who are you? What's the identity of your college ministry? Does your college ministry have identity? And can your students say what the identity is? But you might be building identity. And that's okay. If you're building identity, the dumbest thing in the world would be like, okay, I've chosen these 3 random words and henceforth we're here. No, take the time, build the culture. I was talking to a guy earlier today and he's like, okay, I just started off college ministry. What do I need to do? And I say, you need to treat it like Legos. Just build that thing slowly. Like you're just adding pieces here and here. You're building. What should we do more of? What should we do less of? So I sit down with college students and I ask them these questions. And you can get anything in that answer. And I asked it very broadly, specifically. So like the other day, we should do more worship nights. I was like, cool. So you're thinking more event focused. But what should we do less of? They said we should be less cliquish. And I go, oh, okay. How's that been going on? Like, let's talk about that. You're now aware of a blind spot. And so you now have opportunity for growth. I've been obedient, but in my obedience, cliques have developed my leadership team. Okay, so now I need to sit and look at that. I also haven't heard the word clique in like 10 years, and they brought it back this year. And so I was like, okay, well, we're going to have to get rid of that word. The next one is huge. Are we training leaders? Train leaders, train leaders, train leaders, train leaders. Train leaders. Train leaders. And I would say that again until I'm blue in the face. God has asked you to train leaders. Does our ministry look like our campus? And did our understanding of our campus grow? For so long, Stephen F. Austin State is a large female campus. The percentage is so heavily female, probably 60-70% of the campus. But it's a state school, and you would never know that. It's not Texas Women's University. It's SFA. Maybe it's because our colors are purple and white. Maybe that's what it is. But forever, if that's 60%, that means at least 40% are still males. Like, that's a good majority. Well, in our college ministry, it's not how it was. It was like 5% males because there was no guys. And what happened is, like, God blessed our college ministry with men. And we could talk about this strategic part of it and the obedient step for us and everything, but I'm not really looking at nuts and bolts. Unless we want to talk nuts and bolts, then we can. But we were able to now, like, where our college ministry reflects the male-female demographic of our campus, and so you're able to reflect that. I went into the Reaching International Students breakout earlier today, and I was like, okay, we're going to reach them. And then I realized very quickly, okay, we barely have any international students. Like, this isn't it. But what do we have? We have a ton of other minorities. How are we reaching them? I went to NAACP thing and realized there are all of these organizations, African American organizations, that none of my students have ever heard of, and these students never get interacted with my students ever. And so one of the things we're doing this year is like, hey, student leaders, we're going to the NAACP fair. Like, we're joining groups. Like, we're figuring this out because our college ministry needs to reflect our campus. And so just stuff like that. And an understanding of our campus growth, that's huge if you're just starting out. Do we understand the ebbs and flows of our college campus? I'm spoiled. The college I went to was SFA, and now I'm a college pastor at SFA. So I didn't have to go through this learn the campus phase. I just knew stuff. But if I ever had to move, I'm sure that'd be a really long process. Was it worth what it cost? That talks about time, talks about everything. Are students living isolated or in community? Are we student-led and staff-supported? Okay, this one's huge. It's another building block. It took us a couple years to get here, but are we student-led and staff-supported? Yeah. Have we reflected with our student leaders? I kind of just put that in there because that's what we're doing. How are we reaching students who don't have any spiritual affiliation? So growing up, I grew up in the church. You guys grew up in the church? Okay, so I always got told, be ready to defend your faith, apologetics, because the atheists are out there. That's kind of what I got told. I'm being a little sarcastic. That's what I got told. But did you know that the largest demographic of people when it comes to spiritual beliefs is actually those who just have no affiliation? They just don't care about religion. That 40% of all Americans just have no, or particularly in the millennials and Gen Zs, a little higher, I think, just have no affiliation. So it's not like you're trying to defend your faith against an atheist, which is only 5%, but you're more about the person who just never really thought about it. And so gear your college ministry not full of Bible Belt grenades that they can launch toward atheists, but how are we letting people who just have no spiritual affiliation, how are we letting them feel like they can be home? And so we say things like, you can belong before you believe, and you can come be a part of this community even though you don't think and act the same way. That's okay. That's something we still have room to grow in, though. Number 12, do we blow it all up and start over? College ministers, we're notorious at this. We do something for 1 year. It's like, that was a terrible idea. Why don't we just completely get rid of Sunday school? We'll get rid of community groups. We'll get rid of our worship nights. We'll get rid of on-campus. I talked to a really old college minister the other day. And I say old. He's in his 80s, so I think I can get away with it. And he was saying that college ministers, they think that you need to just blow it all up and you need to start over. And they just do that every year. And then the college student just struggles. But what you actually just need to do is understand success equals obedience. And then you make shifts. You make adjustments. You make tweaks. Have we created spaces for multi-generational interaction? If your college ministry is only about one age demographic, and that's college students, and you're connected with a local church, I really would encourage you to be connected to your local church. So create spaces organizationally within your structure. Have you created volunteer opportunities for people who are over the age of 24 to serve in college ministry, and really over the age of 30 to serve in college ministry? And so we think about that not all the time, but I feel like I go back to it. Okay, I've created spaces here, here, and here. How could I create space here and here? What happens is that we begin to develop leaders. We just use our college students to do what we need to do. But it's like, hey, you have an entire church that could want to serve. How are you letting them be there? 14, whose life's been forever changed? That one's just for your heart to smile. And you get to remember the stories of God's goodness. And then number 15, I added this one in because it reflected my life way too much. Are we in too many meetings? Do we need to restructure our meetings? Often you can do a hard restructure of your meetings, but you just need to do an evaluation at the end of the year. Those questions are just questions that we use with our student leaders at the end of the year to help us understand, okay, success equals obedience, but we still have room to grow. Where do we have room to grow? Let's analyze that and let's keep going. And then when you realize those opportunities for growth, you got to take them for the Lord. Saying, God, where are we at? Where are we at? Where are we at? But I'll share one more thought, and then I want us to open it up for like questions or like what stood out to you, or if you just want to know about like how we do ministry or anything like that, we can just chit chat. But I was talking to that same older gentleman, and he'd done college ministry for years. I mean, years. Like he'd been at one campus for like 35 years. And it's like, okay, you're the guy I want to talk to. Like, how do you do this? And it's interesting. I thought I would like sit down with him and he would just load these incredible strategies on me, but he didn't. He didn't. He just kind of said like, "Hey, John, there's more than one way to do it right." In referring to college ministry, and that sounds like such a simple sentence that all of us like know, but sometimes we come to these conferences and we end up like searching for the right way. Like, well, it has to be this right way, and that's the successful way, and that is the way. And like, there's more than one way to do it right. And so if you want to do a small group-based ministry, that's what we do. Congrats. You want to do a large group ministry where you meet every Sunday night for worship? That's cool. If you want to do, I don't know, like insert however you want to do it, like that's fine. As long as it's a step of obedience, then go that route. But if it's not a step of obedience and it's just your best idea, you need to hit the brakes like crazy. You need to repent. You need to ask the Lord for guidance. So, guys, that's my breakout. It's really not centered around like, hey, here's some really new practical steps to revolutionize your leadership pipeline. It's centered around what's the heart? Because if your heart is success equals achievement, you're going to be left hurting and dry. Because I've been left hurting and dry. But if success is, all right, God, I'm just going to be obedient. And it's just so much more fulfilling. And you will be obedient and disobedient in the same semester. And so we're not going to like label a semester a successful semester because a semester had success and not success or unsuccessful. Like, because you were obedient and you were disobedient. So you're going to have both those. You just get to look at actions, though. Anyways, any thoughts? Just as we sit here and I guess I was going to say we chat, but it's just been me. Have anything stood out to you guys, or any questions you want to ask before I end with that quote, or open up Q&A, or any questions about how we do ministry or anything like that? You're welcome to ask them.
Maybe we should fast track him to be a small group leader or whatever. Or, in some cases.
How do you deal with comparison?
Sure.
Because even though, success isn't about numbers.
Sure.
But there looks like these people are being more successful. They have a thriving ministry. What do you do with those thoughts?
Yeah. So we've all dealt with that. Every single one of us. So the easy way to answer that is, the textbook comparison is the thief of all joy, but that doesn't actually help us here. There's a small African American church in our community called NAC Bible Fellowship, and Pastor Rod is the pastor, and he was talking to our pastor, and we're not mega church. We have like 300 to 400 people on a Sunday, and but we're not like 30 people on a Sunday like NAC Bible. And so Pastor Rob was talking to our pastor, and they were talking about how we all have, the same calling as children of God and everything, but we've been given different assignments, and our job is to do our assignment, and their job is to do their assignment. I just think some of it comes back to our why. Like, I've got to know, what has God called me to? Because that's gonna emphasize my why of why I do it. Because if God's just called you to do that, then you have to come back and say, okay, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. Yeah, so comparison is a really funny thing. I can sometimes go to my buddies' gatherings and I'm like, gosh, they had so many people there. And then they're like, man, it was kind of low tonight. And you're like, what? But their assignment is in a different location, in a different context, doing different things. I went to my buddy's pastor at Tech, and he had all these people at his gathering. I was like, dude, this is crazy. And my wife's like, yeah, we serve at SFA with 13,000 students. They serve at Texas Tech with at least 50,000, at least 100,000. Of course they have more students. And you're like, well, that makes a lot of sense. And then you can take the same thing and apply it to A&M or UT Tyler. UT Tyler has 6,000 students on it. And so you're going to have different results just based upon the demographics. Now, that can become a little fuel by which you make yourself feel better. Well, I would have more numbers if I was somewhere else because I'm that good. Well, I've been guilty of that before. And so you've got to relax and chill. Just understand your assignment. What does God ask me to do? I'm going to do it faithful. It reminds me of the parable of the talents. God asked you to care for this, and you said yes. And so you did. Reminds me of the parable of the talents. Yeah. Well, cool. Tell you what, how about I pray, and if y'all want to hang out and ask questions, we or just chat or whatever, we can do that. And we'll go from there. Cool? All right. And Lord, thank you so much just that we can sit and have a conversation. Thank you so much that we can remind our souls that success isn't based upon our achievements, but it's based upon obedience. And I just pray for moments of weakness when our soul says, no, success is based upon what we can do, what we can accomplish, that your Spirit would speak to us and say, hey, success is that you obey me. And God, I know I will only obey you as I abide with you, as my love for you grows. And so, Lord, I pray that abiding, being with you is a part of our daily rhythm, and that we would find our success in our obedience to you, not what other people say it needs to be. In your name we pray. Amen.